Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
All right, welcome to the next episode of our Next Gen CMO podcast. I'm super excited to have my friend and frequent recurring guest and partner in crime every day, John Eitel, our Chief Sales Officer at Demandbase. And we're going to cover a lot of ground today. So welcome, John.
Awesome. Hello. Good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So we had John here, I think on our first episode, about a month ago. And then now we're back, and you should hear from John maybe about once a month or so. So if you keep checking back in with us, you'll get more of these conversations. So we're excited to talk today. There's a lot of recent trend information going on, a lot of pop culture, sports news things going on. So we'll hit on some of that. You ready?
Sounds like a plan. I was going to say, I'm glad to get the invite back. Hopefully we can keep this going. But yeah, excited to catch up with you on all the comings and goings in our day-to-day in our world, as well as kind of in our ecosystem here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, most recent news, you and I just went to the Adobe Summit, about a week and a half ago? And the one in Las Vegas, we hadn't sponsored or partnered on the Adobe event in a few years. And this year we decided to kind of make an investment and go there, and kind of believing that big events are back and people are back. And obviously the tech industry, especially amongst enterprise, really big there. So tell me, what was your takeaway of the event at a high level?
Yeah, look, last week was a lot of fun. I actually had never been to Adobe Summit before, so this is kind of neat for me to be able to see it, be able to kind of take it all in. And I would say lots of really great things that came out of it. It was an action-packed week. Like I met in true Vegas fashion, I crammed a lot of things in all at once. I think you and I had an executive retreat the day we got there, and then we quickly kind of jumped into the event, but got to spend some time on the floor, got to meet with like 15 customers and partners in like 48 hours. So it was, really great, for that. I feel like you just had so much accessibility. Everybody's there. You can catch up on breakouts, so it was a lot of great time, hearing about what they're bringing to market, what they're excited about, and then even more so like what our customers are excited about, what they're seeing. So yeah, it was a great week overall.
It was good. Yeah, I read a lot of certainly I was there, got a chance to do the customer event. John and I and a few of our teammates took a bunch of customers and prospects and just friends of Demandbase out to the Sphere one night. And that was a brand new, I think the Sphere, I was in Vegas about 15 months ago, and the Sphere was in final development. So it had to have opened in the past year. What'd you think of that event?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty neat. I would say, you and I being kind of big music fans, I've been intrigued by the Sphere project. Supposedly it is the, best of the best and all the kind of the newest technology when it comes to sound and visual. And so I'd heard a lot about it. It was great to be able to go there and experience it with customers. They are packing it in, and we didn't get to see a music show. So I think my next time I would love to go back and catch a show, but we got to see, one of the kind of motion picture movie, kind of shorts that they do in there. And just amazing. I would say I didn't know what to expect probably going into it. And I would say it reminded me a lot of, when I first saw an IMAX movie, that was the epiphany I had was this is the future of how movies, music, sporting events. I was trying to think about all the different kind of, plays that could come off of this. But again, the experience was amazing. You could feel the wind blowing, when there were different parts in the show. You were sitting in one of the seats, and I think you said the seats rattled and moved with you. Sound was amazing, but I think that the technology blew my mind. So I'd say starting there, and the customers, I think we had 3 boxes kind of loaded with customers. I think the turnout was great, just for that very reason of everybody was excited to experience it live, and so that was probably one of the highlights of the week as well.
Yeah, it was cool. So for folks who haven't been to the Sphere, the whole outside, and what you realize quickly, and the whole inside is basically an LED screen. And so on the outside, they're constantly changing out lights. They do different themes. They do hearts, and they do lines, and they do leopard print, and they do Grateful Dead covers. They do all kinds of stuff on the outside. And then the inside feels like an auditorium, or like you're there for a big concert venue. which could be, but turns out that the entire inside is one big screen. So I likened it to Isn't that right, Soarin'? Have you ever ridden that at like Disney? It's like, I think it's at Epcot and I think it's at Disneyland and Disney World, but it's one of those where you don't really know. You just kind of get on and you fly around the world. That's what I kind of took it to, except for 55 minutes instead of 3 or however long the ride is. So I thought it was pretty amazing. Yeah, that whole kind of 4D experience of wind and the elephant would walk through and your butt would shake in the bleachers and whatever. So it was a pretty neat experience, but just a cool thing to do with our customers. Something unique other than kind of standing around and small talking about whatever. Instead, it was kind of giving them a great experience and hopefully a delightful evening.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Cool. All right, well, good. Well, I'm glad that you had some time on the show floor. It sounds like the lot of tech news that came out of this. I mean, a lot of Adobe specific tech news, but I think across the board, I mean, it was AI everywhere. Generative AI, how it's impacting the customer experience, how it's impacting personalization, a lot of stuff, how it's impacting buying groups, which of course is near and dear to our heart at Demandbase. But any of the tech inspire you, surprise you, get you excited?
Yeah, I think that was like the interesting thing. I mean, in talking to folks and seeing the sessions that I saw, like I think you're absolutely right. AI was I think had to be attached to everything. But I think as you and I talked a lot about too, AI messaging needs to evolve to be able to talk about like how it really is differentiated and how it drives this really unique outcome here. And so I think they did a great job of talking about how with some of their releases and launches, AI and is going to help drive personalization at scale, which was, I think, really something that's exciting for me and, probably for you, someone, who cares deeply about that. And even their announcements around, kind of the evolution to buying groups, as you mentioned. And I think that, that was one thing that really jumped out that, sellers for a long time have thought in kind of the groups and committees, right? And marketers tend to market based on individuals. And so it's a convergence of the tech and the way we all think, right? And so I think we're all kind of coming together, around that topic, which I thought was really great. So some really, really cool, announcements. What were some of your favorites and some of the highlights that you kind of like gravitated to?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is that it felt good as Demandbase, feeling like the themes that are important to us are also important to, obviously, to Adobe, but Adobe is so resonant with enterprises and making sure that these sort of big multi-tiered tech-driven organizations that are, our favorite, well, we have lots of favorite customers, but some of those types are great customers. And just to know that we're hopefully marching in the right direction. I mean, we rolled out buying groups this year, and I don't think buying groups, the concept, is a new phenomenon, right? We all know that there are plenty of influencers, blockers in an organization, from, CMO to CSO to CRO to CEO. I mean, all the people, data compliance. I mean, there's a lot of people who get involved in a buying committee, especially when you're talking about something like this. So the concept of having a large buying group and a multi-threaded approach is not new. The automation of it really is. And I think that's where it's really fascinating to see, how does AI find and identify that buying group, allowing us to reach customers and to reach all the people at every stage of that decision making. I thought that was pretty fascinating. And it's certainly something, obviously, like I said, that we're doing, but to see that it's such a trend and a need from customers, which is great.
Yeah, definitely validation. And I think actually that's what I really love about, the implications of AI. I think there's always this concern of like, will it replace the humans? And, my running belief is that in, certain things like, B2B buying, people still want to buy from people. Those old adages I think still apply, but I think the AI can be utilized to really simplify, a lot of these mundane tasks. It can now, be used to help us eliminate blind spots like, what can AI, service and identify as potential buying committees so we can kind of validate them there and not, have to guess. It really can do a lot of the things that you need there. So it really does align to that thought of, AI will be great when it puts humans in the right place to operate more efficiently and smarter there. I think the last thing about the conference too, I think you and I talked a bit about this, but Adobe's a big client of ours as well, so it's great to be there. To capture the what's going on in the community and their launches, but also to be able to talk to them. And I got to spend time with one of our kind of contacts there on the client side here, and they gave us the whole inside scoop of like how are things trending, how are things looking from a conference perspective. They had over 10,000 folks there in person. I think it actually went to 11. 10 was like the original target, and they ended up increasing it and letting more in. kind of last minute there and increasing capacity. They had 20,000 folks attending virtually. So kind of back to, what their numbers were like in, kind of years prior to the pandemic. So it's great to see, that folks are returning back. The other things that I thought were really impressive were their, number of, kind of folks that are, director and above. I think it was 60% of that makeup. And I think they said VP was about 30% of that makeup, which is really, I think, impressive to say the least. That's conference gold in my mind, but I think you're getting, a really engaged audience, who's, kind of a high decision-making power authority and the ability to make things out, which is a really unique thing. Like I think other conferences that I've gone to that are bigger, it's mainly practitioners. And so it's just an interesting mix and makeup. I thought it was also, kind of unique to see that 2/3 of that audience was virtual versus 1/3 in person. And, they also said that they don't plan to do away with virtual. I know some conferences are saying, hey, we're going to go all the way back now that the world's a different place, and they have made the conscious decision to maintain that mix and keep it that way, which I think is good. It allows them to have that content live on for a really, really long time. So I thought that was, good to just dissect the numbers, taking a step back as you and I often do and think about like the business implications of things like conferences like this. And it was pretty impressive when you peel back the layer and look at the numbers.
Yeah, it's an interesting trend. There's two parts of that. So you talked about the mix being older. I think that's interesting. I always think about why are people here? Like, for instance, are they here to have meetings with vendors, partners, people that they know are going to be there in sort of our industry? Is that why they're there? Are they there to kind of shop technology? Are they there to go to the speaker presentations and kind of learn? Is it a development opportunity? So when you say director and above, you got to think it's heavily influenced by decision makers versus, so yes, the content is meaningful, but most likely probably really there to kind of meet with prospects or meet with partners or meet with vendors that they're in business with and conduct meetings. And then the show kind of ends up being a facilitator and a common source of interest for them. So I think that's really interesting. And you're right, that is conference gold because that's what you want is the decision makers versus just the intro to a company, but really the folks who are going to be in the driver's seat when that comes, which is pretty awesome.
Of that 2/3, too, an interesting other side stat was that they were saying, I actually assumed that those 2/3 were, folks trying to cut back on budget, Kelly. So it was maybe people that were like, okay, you should go and we'd like you to have access to the content, but we don't want to pay for hotel or travel. And they actually said it was more skewed towards, director and above, even in the 2/3 of virtual, which I thought was really interesting. And, back to your thought about like, why are they there? I feel like we're starting to see maybe a bit of a change in the way that people, again, return to work. Our new normal is changing and shifting. But I saw a little bit this at Forrester. This is, a sample size of, kind of a few from my point of view, but interesting to trend to watch here. One of our bigger clients came to Forrester last year and said, hey, this is like first conference I've been at, and they lived in Austin, so it was easy for them to do this. But they basically came in and said, I'm going to see 2 sessions. I'm going to meet with you, and then I'm going to be home and catch my son's, baseball game and have dinner with my family. And, to me, I really appreciated that commentary. And it was like, this is kind of the unique new normal we're coming back to, and that people will still want to do these things. They want to connect with the content. They want to connect with key partners. They want to network. But they also want to maintain, that balance of, personal life that we've all been given back in this new world. So I thought that was really unique. And, maybe that's what's going on in that 2/3 there, is there's a lot of folks who are like, I still, want to be active in the community, but I also want to be able to be, present for a daughter's or son's game. And, this is what it allows me to do. It allows me to do both.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's true. I don't think we have the same kind of good boundaries like we used to, where we're going to go to a conference for 3 days and do nothing but that and then come home. We're kind of like, how do we mix them all together? How can I go for a day, pop in, pop out? Especially when you're director above with full calendars. You're like, I want to go, hit my meetings, get out. So I think that's really interesting. I think as a marketer, the hybrid concept is really interesting. The reason is because I think, if I'm thinking about the objectives of the event, if I'm an Adobe event planner, is the online portion serves as reach, right? You can cover a lot more ground. You can generate, you can drive registrations, which are ultimately going to drive leads and follow-ups and all the things that you're going to do to kind of target this group after the event and an audience for your content, which is great. They're not going to offset that audience with sponsorships, right? I've learned enough over the years. We've done enough testing over the years on sponsoring an event virtually is not a good ROI, because the brand sponsorship just doesn't show up in the same way when it's on your little screen in front of you versus like a big over the top booth at a trade show floor or sponsoring like the happy hour at the end of the event or whatever it is. And so I think it's really interesting. I think the face-to-face becomes meetings, becomes brand, becomes, face-to-face community, that kind of, stickiness that comes. And then the virtual allows you to kind of get a lot of people on your list, get a lot of people that are going to start engaging in your content, low cost, but also low profit from the sponsorship side as well. So it's pretty interesting to see. It's probably, you're right, it's probably the formula for the future. But the hardest part of that, I think, is to still get enough human bodies in place to make in live, face to face, that makes the trade show fill up and feel valuable for people to pay the high price of a trade show booth. So that's where that trade-off comes for sure.
Totally. Well, and I think actually like delivering content to both of those mediums and making it engaging for both, right? It has made things harder, but it is, it's interesting that, we may have figured some of these things out, and that's something that hopefully, sticks or stays in some ways.
Yeah. And I think the tech has gotten so cool. Like the virtual rooms, you can put people in to divide them up on their track to choose the path you want to go to. You're almost literally in a virtual conference center where you can kind of choose which speaking event you want to attend. And so, yeah, it's pretty fascinating what tech can do. It's just a matter of if the engagement and the return and the affinity comes with it. So that's cool. I'm glad there were so many people there. I'm glad that you got a chance to meet with the Adobe team and get a little inside scoop on how the business is going. All right. I have a few more hot topics. You ready?
Fire away.
All right. So there was a couple articles that came out recently, one from Gartner and one from Forrester. So one of them was about the expectations on the increase in software purchases for next year. So one thing I read is that people are expecting to spend more in 24 than they spent in 23. I need to find the exact data point. But so, which is surprising, right? We've been in the software industry for a while. We've been we felt the effects of this recession over the last couple of years as budgets are getting tighter and drying up. 1-year deals are becoming more common. Retention is lower, all the things that go with a tough recession. What do you think is happening that people are starting to buy new tech? Or do you think there's a nuance in there as the type of tech that they're starting to buy that might be the issue?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I saw, that stat or a similar stat. And so I think there is something there. We talked about this a little bit last time when we connected about like which was worse, 2022, 2023, or where do we stand in that? And I think actually like both of those years were very, weird in different ways, as we agreed. There was, kind of different nuances to each that made them both tough. But I think, what we did see was there was a lot of just clamping down on spending overall, right? And so I think there is a little bit of the catch up of, we've kind of delayed these decisions, or we put off these decisions for the last few years. There is definitely a lot of shakeup going on too, in kind of the space that's been happening. So you kind of mix those two things together, where companies have delayed decisions probably unnaturally just to kind of wait and see what happens, mixed with new opportunities arising, and maybe even some partners not, being able to continue to develop at the same pace and scale, right? So it means that you're maybe growing out of tools for either your own natural reasons, like you've gotten bigger or you've changed, and you didn't have the ability to buy. So now you can, hopefully, again, as the world is starting to kind of, resemble more normal here, or the product hasn't, been able to keep up with your need. But I think it's a lot of those, culminations of things, which is a great one for, all of us who've been, kind of wading through these waters and kind of waiting to see when, kind of things go back to the best version of normal and optimism starts to creep in. And I would say, it's early in the year. We're only a quarter down, at least from our perspective. But I would say, it feels more promising this year. So I'm happy to say that I feel much more optimistic. And I don't think we'll have to have an argument about of these 3 years, which one was the worst. Like this starts to feel a little bit like maybe the worst days are behind us or the worst years are behind us, and we're moving into a better future here.
Yeah. I try to remind myself that every piece of data, every data point I have about the economy is in the past. So it has to be like, none of it is today. We're always like a step beyond what the data says. So that's a good thing. But I found the source of that stat. It was Gartner, and they said that 61% of organizations plan to spend more. So to me, that makes me think two things. Either based on your point earlier about is AI replacing jobs, is part of this tech leaning towards that either not as maybe replacing jobs, but maybe probably more specifically is helping to make the current folks more efficient so that they don't have to hire a bunch of folks back, given that a lot of companies went through reductions in force last year, have less people, and are maybe considering ways that they can use tech to kind of bridge the gap in the meantime.
Yeah, I think it's intriguing, and I think you're right. I think both of these truths can be true at the same time, and I think you're absolutely right. Like, we've been doing more with less for a while now, right? And so, tools can be a good bridge to kind of bring some relief to those teams that have maybe been doing, a lot with a lot less for a while now. And, this is a good chance to use software to play catch up here.
Yeah, for sure. Another fun stat. You ready for this one?
Fire away again. Yeah, keep it coming.
We're getting old, John. That's basically the take here, is that it's buyers are getting younger, right? That's what we keep hearing, is that the majority of B2B buyers now are sort of born after 1980. So the new people buying tech are buying with a different expectation. Like, you and I are slightly before 1980, just a little bit, but enough that we can remember this sort of before and after of this tech craze, right? We remember what life was like with a telephone call, like a telephone cord around the hallway and hidden in the bathroom. Like, we remember those days. And we know the smartphone days. Like me, my first cell phone was when I was 23 years old, except for the car phone I had in the black leather bag that plugged into the cigarette lighter in college that cost like $8 a minute. So, we're in sort of, we've seen both sides. We're probably the one generation that's seen it both. Now, everybody that's coming in, buying tech, are sort of only in the after. And so if they're mostly in the after stage, then what do you think that drives in terms of their experience or their expectations when they buy, in terms of the seamless usability of the product or the anonymous buying, the sort of self-serve through reviews, the avoidance of having to actually talk to a human like a salesperson when they can do their own research online ahead of time? Like, how do you think that changes, especially you as a sales guy? Like, how do your sellers continue to engage and influence buyers when they don't really want to talk to you until they're right at the point of making a decision?
Yeah. I think it's gotten harder. I think, as we all, we talk about in a lot of ways, and I don't think that even is, tied to this generational issue. I think that everybody is getting, kind of less, open to answering their phone if they don't know who's calling them, right? I think our inbox have got inundated. But I do think, like, this is, it is an intriguing thing for us to keep looking at, because I think as people who study, buying and selling behaviors on a regular basis, and also have, I'd say teenage kids too. Like, I think you get to see, how they think about and evaluate things. I think they are, less tolerant to kind of bad experiences there. Like, I think sometimes we are used to some of the hiccups because we came through the, like, paving your way of the early days, but I think they expect a lot of these things to be kind of, served up in the right ways, and they will abandon quickly, if things are not the way they wanted it to be, in that moment. And so I do think that's a real thing. One of my, last companies I was at did a lot of, studies on generational, buying behaviors. And I think, the newer generations right now actually have, like, a whole different view on, how they see personalization in the internet. Like, I think that they looked at, kind of, the baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and I think we're in, like, Gen Z right now, maybe, if I'm keeping up with my, my names for the different generations. But I think, like, our parents, felt like, personalized internet is creepy. I think we, sometimes get kind of caught off guard by, man, the phone's listening to me because I just talked to Kelly about something, and all of a sudden I got served up that product in Instagram, right? But we understand how it works, right? My kids and your kids, I think, actually, like, expect it to be personalized. They're not as creeped out by it. I think that's all they've known, right? I think they know that the internet is is listening, and that's all they know. Whereas I think we came into this with maybe, like, a purist view of, like, we didn't know Alexa was listening to us, right? Or our parents didn't know that, right? But I think our kids expect it. And I think they get frustrated when it's not meeting those needs, right? Like, I hear them say, like, oh, like this, website definitely isn't, doesn't know me. It's served up like a washer and dryer. I'm a 19-year-old. I'm not going to buy a washer and dryer, right? Like simple things like that. And so they really, I think, embrace a lot of the slickness and newness, and are less put off by it. So I think it is interesting to see, how that kind of translates and cascades.
Yeah. I mean, I think it puts the pressure back on us as marketers and sellers to deliver those experiences in a way that's seamless. I mean, you came from a company that was, predominantly a PLG model, and that model caters to that audience, right? That audience that doesn't want to have to talk to anybody, like try it first. Once it's good enough, I'll upgrade in the product, never have to talk to a human. Like, how does that work? So I think it's really interesting. I think it's a pressure back on us. I think the other thing that we see, not necessarily driven by the age, but this, and it's probably more driven by the recession, is this increase in indecision when it comes to making a purchase. So there was a Forrester marketing survey recently that said that 75% of B2B marketers are taking longer to commit to a purchase. It was like 67% a year ago. So it was 2/3 of the audience a year ago. Now it's 75%. So 3/4 of that audience are taking longer. There's this book called I think it's called The Jolt Effect.
Battling indecision there. Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah, an indecision book, right? And it talks about people are happy to, now they're not thinking like this, but in marketing language, they're happy to become a lead. They're happy to engage in content. They're happy to maybe even give their info to download a piece of content. They're happy to fill out a form that says, I'd like to learn more about this. But when it comes to actually getting on a call, moving it forward, getting closer to, quote, making a decision, they sort of disappear. And there's this sort of fear that creeps in at that indecision stage. I think it's where we see, like, for us, MQLs, SQLs come through, then we see this sort of pause that says, I'm not quite ready to flip to pipeline and be marketed and sold to. Like, I got to, now that I have more information, now I need to go back maybe and go get my budget in order and go get my process and my people in order and get my leadership on board or whatever. But that fear sort of kicks in. Any thoughts about that? Again, like, as a seller, your team is the one who's dealing with that frustrated silence that happens at that stage.
Yeah, the maybes. Well, I think there's a lot there. One would say, great book recommendation for those listening here. If you haven't read The Jolt Effect, I highly recommend it. It's written by the same author that did Challenger Sale, but couldn't be more relevant for times like these. And I think we've all probably since felt, the indecision in different ways. I think when times are chaotic, right, it's easier to just kind of pump the brakes or pause or do nothing, right? And so it does have some great advice on how to break through that and really, help simplify and get to decision quickly, which is really great there. But it is a reality, that we are going through today. And so I think the winners will be the folks that figure that out. I think also, like, it shows up in a lot of different ways, as you're tracking these metrics too. Like, we talk a lot about like losses to competitors, but I would say probably in the last year or two, we've probably seen, a bigger rise in, losing to indecision, which can be equally as much of a competitor, as your biggest competitor, right? When a decision doesn't get made and nothing happens, it's just the same. But I think we don't think about that sometimes with the same rigor and focus, right? And so I think that's what's really important for people to call attention to this and, do the things that they can to navigate it as well. Like, I think that's what I try to equip our teams with is, the ability to quantify and put a cost to indecision, right? And be able to share, like, doing nothing does cost you more than you think. I think it's an easy humanistic, thing to think about. The status quo doesn't cost you anything, but it actually can have, some implications. So just being able to intelligently navigate that indecision and provide the buyers with some insight into that, I think, is how you can move through it there.
Yeah. I mean, sales and marketing is definitely more science than art, I think, in that regard. Just understanding, to your point about, especially when you're doing a category sell versus a competitive sell, just such a difference in the way that where that indecision is going to show up, whether is it comparison between two products, or is it just convincing them that in our case that they need account-based solutions in order to move their business forward. So I think that's super interesting. You want to move on from tech, talk sports? We're kind of...
Yeah, let's do it. Well, yeah, let's definitely talk about what's going on in the world of sports, Kelly.
So much going on. I have a hot weekend of my own personal. I'm sure you're asking about the Hopping Family Sports. I have an obscene weekend of, like, I think I counted a minimum of 18 games this weekend for my 3 hopping kids. which is pretty ridiculous, but so fun. My favorite thing in the world to do, but less interesting to everybody else. And so the part that's more interesting to everybody else is March Madness. We got guys in, girls going. So let's start with the guys, because that's the easy layup in comparing my bracket to yours. Let's just.
Yep. There's that.
Who do you have picked to win the whole thing?
So for those that don't know why I'm laughing uncomfortably, we do have an office betting pool, or not a betting pool, but I guess it is a betting. We put $20 into Venmo, so we pick some folks. But I'm thinking nearing last place here, because I did the obviously bad idea of backing your alma mater all the way to the Final Four when there's no chance in hell that they could make it there on their own. So I am, I'm suffering for that, because I had Texas going all the way to match up with UConn. But I actually am happy to see that actually men's and women's, and I know we'll talk about women's in a bit. Yeah, there's a couple schools that have, both a team in the Final Four for both male and female brackets, which is neat. UConn being one of them, and I'm back in the Huskies. In fact, when I was in Vegas, I am not as big a gambler as Kelly. My life is risky enough doing what I do. But I did actually place a sports bet on UConn going all the way here. So that'll be my redemption. I may lose to hopping in the office pool, but hopefully we'll win my overall bets back in UConn. I think for winning the third straight time, maybe fourth actually. I mean, they've obviously got a great thing going there,
and they've been kind of destroying everybody all the way through as well. So yeah, let's just talk about that. So I mean, it is a sucker's bet to bet on your own alma mater. Well, I am in Texas A&M, but we were in there, but I was smart enough to say, I guess Houston's going to take them out. And they did in overtime, because we can't make a free throw. But Houston made it through, which was good, and they've been knocked out since. I've learned that there are no Texas teams left. I think now, are there any SEC teams even left? I think the last one of those got knocked out a few days ago.
Alabama may be still in it on the men's bracket side, I think.
No, UConn, NC State. I don't remember who the four are.
I think maybe. I had to say,
But yes, I have UConn winning the whole thing. Just to get exact numbers in case anybody's curious, I'm in 8th place. John's in 39th place. We have a good win. I have no aspirations about winning the bracket. My only goal is to beat John. And so I'm pretty excited that with 3 games left, hopefully that's a shoe-in.
The odds are looking pretty good there. Yeah.
But I did have Kentucky going all the way in the championship, and they lost first round. So that sort of eliminated 1/4 of my bracket almost immediately. But that's okay. But it's always fun. The hard part was we were in Vegas on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We didn't even get the joy of sitting in the sports book and seeing the live games with a vested interest in the results, because we were on the off days in between the weekend tournaments. So.
Yeah, I was going to say we were in the dead zone between the 2 rounds there. But it's a fun time of year. I don't watch enough. I actually don't watch much basketball during the regular season, but I can find myself committing to this. It's awesome to see some of these upsets. The myth of a perfect bracket, is there for a reason there. It doesn't exist because so much craziness can happen here.
Now, I will give one shout out to your alma mater. I don't know I haven't looked to see where he's at now, but apparently Bijan Robinson had a ridiculously accurate bracket for a long time. He was ranked in the top in the country in one of those national of the 3 million whatevers. He was in the very top. So there's one shout out for UT alum.
Thank you for that. As I said, as hard as it may be for you to do, he broke the bracket on me after the first round, but he made it through the first round with picking all those upsets. I took some solace in that because he also picked UT to go all the way. So I was like, all right, I caught a bunch of grief when I submitted that bracket and was called a homer for picking my team to go that far. But I believed in Bijan, and Bijan believed it could happen too. So I'm not alone in my foolish betting here, I guess.
Oh, I love it. All right. So maybe more interesting even than men's college basketball is what's going on, despite my sometimes adversity to women's sports. The Caitlin Clark effect is legit and real. The woman is amazing. What have you been thinking? I know you've been watching some Caitlin Clark.
I'm going to actually, you and I have gone back and forth on this a couple of times. So what is your version of women's sports, actually? I don't think I've ever asked the question, that we've joked about it. And I think it seems completely off character and off brand for you as well. Out of character and off brand. What's the story there?
My feeling of, so just for background, I am a female. I played all the sports growing up. I played tennis from when I was little all the way through. I played volleyball. I played softball. I ran track. I played basketball. I played them all. And I loved sports. And I still do. And so I love playing them. And I loved watching sort of women-intended sports. Like I love watching volleyball. I love watching women's tennis. So there's parts of it that I really enjoy. I think the parts that are kind of like the newsmakers for women's sports are typically women's team sports that are pro. And so what you end up seeing is like the WNBA or women's professional soccer. Those are the ones where I think like you see all the advocacy about, equal pay and all the things. And I think, so I was trying to think about why don't I like women's sports? It's probably not because I don't support women playing sports. It's because the sports that women play professionally are not interesting to me. I don't watch men's basketball. I don't watch women's soccer. I don't watch men's basketball. I don't watch men's soccer. So for me, like, it's just the sports that they play. If women's volleyball was professional and that was like, I would support that because I love the sport and that's a sport that's entertaining to me. So I was thinking about like, even like we'll watch women's golf occasionally on TV, especially if the men are off that weekend. But we will watch women's golf, like we'll watch women's tennis. Like there's some fierce, competitors there. And so I do like that. But it's like I said, it's the big ones that are always advocating because of whose salaries are so dependent on ticket sales, and ticket sales have been low traditionally, soccer and basketball, that I think that's where I don't have a lot of interest because I don't watch the sports anyway. If my favorite sport to watch is football, that I love from 5 years old to 18 years old. I love anybody who's not getting paid. I love college football. Occasionally watch pro football. Women don't play that. And so that just happens to be they like men's sport because the sport they play is more interesting.
Awesome. Yeah, I just say you said that a few times and I never took the time to ask. So I appreciate the clarity and that makes sense. Like, I think actually like, the Caitlin Clark phenomenon has been a fun one to watch. I probably jumped on the bandwagon and started fanboying probably this year. And I love her attitude. I love her swagger. I love she just can't be guarded. I think someone made a joke in one of the games that her range is basically anytime she steps into the arena, that's her range. And, it's really tough to guard an athlete like that. But I just thought it was, amazing to see, how she seems to be kind of selling out arenas, wherever she goes. I talked to some clients at the Summit there who were from Iowa, and they were saying that they, wanted to take their daughter to a game and nosebleed seats were $500. So, it's just amazing to hear, that she is, she's filling up arenas and drawing a fan base and really, I think, clearing the road for a lot of other athletes too. You're now starting to hear about a lot of the other folks, that are coming up behind her. And so I think it's a generational kind of talent and uniqueness that's really kind of fun to watch here. Then Iowa, we're not even into the Final Four. I'll be tuned in tonight to see the women's Final Four tonight. But I was, tracking and following the LSU game. And that was one of the, I think one of the largest, kind of viewership games to date here for the sport. So pretty amazing.
13 million fans, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so for by the stats, which blew me away, it's more than any other women's, college basketball game. They compared it also, I think, breaking, kind of from the norms here, because I think you're right. A lot of times it gets compared like for like. Every MLB game last season, every NHL game last season, every MLS game last season, every NBA game last season except one. We're talking about the regular season here. Every college football regular season game, -1. So, just amazing to see. And again, we're not even into the Final Four. It was cool to see the, Jason Sudeikis courtside, who I love and think is hilarious, mixing it up. And that one had some fun drama to it. So it'll be great to see if tonight they even more so shatter that record, which is fun to watch here.
Awesome. Yeah, we love Jason Sudeikis too. Jim and I made a video one year. I had a red Adidas tracksuit. Do you remember him? And doing the what's up with Jeff? Anyway, we made a whole video about it. It's on YouTube somewhere if you're bored.
Oh, okay, all right.
No one to see this.
Nothing bold to dig up here.
Videoing, yeah. I think this Caitlin Clark thing is pretty fascinating. Like you said, the numbers. I did watch that LSU game, at least the second half of it. And yeah, just here, like watching her, she had like 9 3-pointers, and all of them were not on the 3-point line. Like you said, it's just being on the court. She'd be 4 feet behind the 3-point line. She would have been like, you can't guard her. Like the defender's right in front of her, and she just does a breakaway like 3 and puts it in. It's amazing. So she's really fun to watch. What's really interesting about her, she's a senior now, but when she came in during COVID. And so she was playing to completely empty arenas, like her first year. So imagine that, like how boring would that be? This just you and the other team and no fans in the stands at all. And you're playing to now going to this sold out. I think a year ago, they sold out 6 home games. This year, they sold out every home game and almost every single away game. Like just amazing stats on what that effect. And if you read or listen to her interviews, she never talks about herself. She talks about her team. She talks about her coach. She talks about her fans. But she's a pretty impressive gal. And she even says when she watches pictures of her as a freshman, she was such like a scrawny little cheer or whatever. And now she's, gotten stronger and she's gotten faster, and she's really, you can tell, invested in her craft. And it's pretty amazing. And I think pretty inspiring to both like little girls, little boys, anybody watching. To your point, I mean, like more people are tuning in than any other, a lot of the other leagues and the big sports games. So pretty awesome. I can't wait to see what she does coming up. So.
Yeah. No, I think it will be fun to see. There's even like, I guess Ice Cube came out and made an offer to her of $5 million for her to come join, his Big 3 league here. So I think you said it best. She's actually doing it with a lot of grace and humility, and not a lot of like me motivation. And I think everybody asks, like, are you going to take the money? And she's like, I got to get my team through, the next few games. Like that's where my attention's going. That's where my focus is going. So it seems like a great role model. Amazing to see her kind of shattering and breaking records, making the league a better league. So yeah, it'll be fun to see how this kind of carries forward.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun weekend of basketball. We'll see how that goes, and then a lot of other youth sports around me.
The 16 games in the Hopping family. I don't know how you do it. Again, you're pretty impressive in a lot of fronts, but I would say that one for sure. Like going from end of quarter rally, big conference season to going into kids sports. I think it's 16 games in multiple cities too, right? I think you said you and your husband are gonna have to divide and conquer, which is even crazier.
Split between North Austin, South Austin, and Dallas. So we'll get there, and then heading into the solar eclipse on Monday, which right now for those listening, Austin is like in the dead heart of solar eclipse viewing. So that's going to be exciting too. And it's my birthday on the solar eclipse day. So that's fun. Like what a great way to celebrate, to walk outside and stare at the sky with glasses on. So it should be a fun weekend. But I have loved the conversation. I love catching up with you. Thank you for coming and hanging out with me for the last bit. And hopefully I'll see you back in a few weeks.
Sounds great. Thanks, Kelly. Talk soon.